Dr. Michael Stevens was having one of those days where everything seemed to go wrong. His alarm hadn't gone off, the hospital cafeteria had run out of coffee, and 3 of his patients had complicated cases that required his full attention. To make matters worse, the hospital administrator had been pressuring the staff about budget cuts and efficiency improvements. By mid-afternoon, dark circles had formed under his eyes, and his patience was wearing thin. The free clinic section of Metro General Hospital was particularly busy that day. Located in a neighborhood that served many working-class families, it was often filled with patients who couldn't afford private health care. Dr. Stevens had been working at the hospital for 8 years and prided himself on his dedication, though, lately, the mounting pressures had started to affect his usually friendly demeanor. It was just past 4:30 p.m. when a man walked into the clinic area. He wore faded jeans, a simple gray t-shirt, and a worn baseball cap pulled low over his eyes. His beard was slightly unkempt, and he carried a small notebook. Nothing about him suggested importance or wealth. He looked like any other person from the neighborhood coming in for treatment. The man stood quietly by the nurse's station for a moment, observing the busy scene around him. When he approached Dr. Stevens, who was updating a patient chart at the counter, his voice was soft and respectful. "Excuse me, doctor. I was wondering if you could tell me about the plans for the pediatric cancer wing renovations. I heard there were some delays." Dr. Stevens barely looked up from his chart. "Are you a patient or a family member?" he asked curtly. "No, I'm not," the man replied. "I'm just interested in—" Dr. Stevens cut him off with a sharp sigh. "Look, sir, if you're not a patient or family member, I really don't have time for this. We're understaffed and overworked as it is. Some of us have actual work to do here." The man's expression remained calm despite the doctor's rudeness. "I understand you're busy. Maybe there's someone else I could speak with." "Try administration on the 5th floor, Doctor," Stevens said dismissively, already turning away. "Though good luck getting any straight answers from them. This whole place is falling apart thanks to whoever bought it. Probably some rich guy who's never set foot in a hospital except for a photo op." The man nodded silently, tucked his notebook into his back pocket and walked away. One of the nurses who had overheard the exchange gave Dr. Stevens a disapproving look. "What?" the doctor snapped. "We don't have time for random people wandering in asking questions. Probably a journalist or something." The nurse shook her head. "You never know who people are, Dr. Stevens. Maybe you should take a break. You've been here since dawn." "No time for breaks," he muttered, reaching for another patient chart. "Not if we want to keep this place running." As the man in the baseball cap walked through the hospital corridors, he stopped occasionally to observe different departments. He smiled kindly at children in the waiting areas and nodded respectfully to the medical staff hustling past. No one paid him much attention, just another visitor in a busy hospital. Near the pediatric wing, a young janitor was struggling with a broken cleaning cart. The man quietly helped him fix the wheel, chatting easily about the hospital as they worked. Unlike Dr. Stevens, the janitor was eager to talk. "Yeah, this place almost shut down last winter," the janitor explained. "Then some foundation bought it. Things have been getting better slowly, but we're still waiting on the big changes they promised, especially for the kids' cancer ward. Those kids deserve better than what they've got now." "They certainly do," the man agreed, his eyes showing genuine concern. "You know what's weird?" the janitor continued. "The new owner doesn't want his name anywhere. Most rich folks put their name on everything, right? But this guy, whoever he is, made them take down the donor wall they were building. My buddy in maintenance said the board members seem almost scared of upsetting him." The man smiled slightly at this. "Maybe he just wants to help without the attention." "Maybe. Hey, thanks for the help with the cart. What are you here for anyway? You don't look sick." The man hesitated for just a moment. "Just checking on some things. Thanks for the conversation." As the visitor continued through the hospital, he made notes in his small notebook, occasionally taking pictures of equipment and facility issues with his phone. In the current pediatric oncology ward, he spent nearly an hour sitting quietly in the corner of the playroom, watching as children receiving treatment tried to find moments of joy despite their circumstances. The playroom was small, with outdated toys and peeling paint on the walls. The medical equipment, while functional, was clearly aging. When a little boy in a wheelchair dropped his book and couldn't reach it, the visitor quickly moved to help, handing it back with a gentle smile. The boy's mother thanked him, assuming he was a volunteer or perhaps a relative of another patient. "Are you a doctor?" the little boy asked curiously. "No," the man replied with a warm smile. "But I'm someone who cares very much about places like this." What Dr. Stevens didn't know, what almost no one at the hospital knew, was that the unassuming man in the baseball cap wasn't just a random visitor. He was Keanu Reeves, one of Hollywood's most beloved actors, known not only for his blockbuster movies but for his extraordinary generosity and humility, and most significantly, he was now the majority owner of Metro General Hospital through his private foundation, which he had established years ago in honor of his sister, who had lost her battle with leukemia. Keanu had deliberately kept his involvement quiet. When the hospital had faced bankruptcy 3 months earlier, his foundation had stepped in with the necessary funds to save it, on the condition that his role remain confidential. He preferred to observe the real workings of the hospital without the fanfare and special treatment his fame would inevitably bring. He wanted to see the hospital as patients saw it, to understand its problems firsthand rather than through filtered reports from administrators eager to please a celebrity owner. What he had witnessed today troubled him. While many staff members showed remarkable dedication despite difficult circumstances, others, like Dr. Stevens, clearly showed the strain of working in an underfunded facility. The building itself needed significant updates, particularly in the pediatric oncology department, which was especially close to his heart. As Keanu left the hospital that evening, he made one final note in his book: "Expedite renovations. Staff needs support, not just equipment but morale. Doctor in free clinic. Follow up." Unknown to Dr. Stevens, his dismissive interaction with the hospital's new owner would soon lead to unexpected consequences, though not the kind he might fear. The next day would bring revelations that would change the doctor's perspective forever. 3 months before the encounter between Dr. Stevens and the unassuming man in the baseball cap, Metro General Hospital had been on the verge of collapse. The hospital, which had served the community for over 60 years, was drowning in debt. Insurance payments barely covered costs, and their commitment to treating everyone, regardless of ability to pay, had left them financially vulnerable. The hospital board had gathered on a rainy Tuesday evening to discuss their limited options. The mood in the conference room was grim as they reviewed the numbers one last time. "We have maybe 2 months before we need to start closing departments," explained Robert Chen, the hospital's financial director, his voice heavy with defeat. "The pediatric oncology department is losing the most money, but it's also the one that serves the most vulnerable patients." The board members exchanged troubled glances. Metro General was the only hospital within 20 miles that offered specialized pediatric cancer treatment accessible to families without premium insurance. "What about the government bailout we applied for?" asked Dr. Wilson, the chief of medicine. "Denied," Chen replied. "They suggested we merge with Westlake Memorial." A groan went around the table. Westlake Memorial was a luxury hospital across town that catered to wealthy patients. They had been trying to buy Metro General for years, planning to convert it into a cosmetic surgery center and upscale medical offices. "We'd have to turn away half our patients," Dr. Wilson said. "That's not an option." Just as the meeting was about to conclude, Linda Patel, the hospital CEO, received a phone call that she stepped outside to take. When she returned, her expression had completely changed. "That was a representative from the Horizon Foundation," she announced. "They want to discuss acquiring the hospital." The board members looked confused. No one had heard of the Horizon Foundation. "They're offering to cover all our debt and provide an additional $50 million for renovations and equipment," Patel continued, her voice tinged with disbelief. "Their only conditions are that we continue serving our current patient population and that their involvement remains confidential." "That's unusual," Chen said cautiously. "What's the catch?" "No catch, according to them. They specialize in saving struggling medical facilities that serve underprivileged communities. The representative said their founder has a personal interest in pediatric cancer treatment." "This sounds too good to be true," Dr. Wilson said, voicing what everyone was thinking. Patel nodded in agreement. I thought so too. But they're willing to meet tomorrow to discuss details, and they're sending over preliminary paperwork tonight. Their lawyer said they can move quickly if we're interested. The next day, 2 representatives from the Horizon Foundation arrived at the hospital. They were professional and thorough, explaining that their foundation had been established to improve healthcare access in communities like theirs. They answered every question and addressed every concern with transparency. The paperwork they provided was straightforward, with none of the predatory clauses the board had feared. There is one more thing, the lead representative said toward the end of the meeting. Our founder would like to meet with you privately, Ms. Patel, before anything is finalized. Later that afternoon, Patel sat in her office, nervously straightening papers on her desk as she awaited the mysterious benefactor. When her assistant announced the arrival of her visitor, she stood to greet him and found herself face to face with Keanu Reeves. Thank you for meeting with me, Ms. Patel, he said with a gentle smile, extending his hand. Patel was momentarily speechless, but quickly recovered her composure. Mr. Reeves, we had no idea. Please have a seat. As they sat down, Keanu explained his interest in the hospital. My sister had leukemia, he shared, his voice soft but steady. She fought for years. The medical team who cared for her became like family to us. They didn't just treat her illness, they protected her dignity and her spirit. He paused, looking out the window at the hospital grounds. When she passed away, I promised myself I'd honor her memory by helping other families going through the same struggle. I established the foundation under a different name to focus on the work rather than, well, the attention my involvement might bring. I understand. Patel nodded. But why our hospital specifically? One of your former patients contacted my foundation, Keanu explained. Their child received treatment here last year. They couldn't say enough good things about your medical team, but they mentioned the facility was struggling. When we looked into it, we saw a hospital that puts patients before profit. That's rare and worth saving. Over the next hour, they discussed his vision for the hospital. He was particularly interested in modernizing the pediatric oncology wing, creating spaces that would support not just the medical needs of children, but their emotional well-being too. Children undergoing cancer treatment spend so much time in hospitals, he said. Those spaces should bring comfort, not additional stress. When Patel asked about the confidentiality requirement, Keanu smiled sheepishly. I don't want special treatment when I visit, which I plan to do regularly. I want to see the real hospital, how it functions, what it needs, not a polished version prepared for a VIP. And honestly, I'd rather the focus stay on the hospital's work, not on me. By the end of the meeting, Patel was convinced of his sincerity. The board unanimously approved the acquisition, and within weeks the Horizon Foundation had cleared all of Metro General's debt. The changes began slowly. First came critical equipment upgrades and repairs to the building's infrastructure. Staffing was increased in departments that had been stretched thin. Small improvements appeared throughout the hospital. Better coffee in the break rooms, upgraded computers at the nurses' stations, new beds for patient rooms. Most employees attributed these changes to good management of the mysterious foundation's funds. Only Patel and the board knew the truth about their benefactor. As promised, Keanu visited regularly, usually dressed casually and often unrecognized, observing operations and talking with staff who had no idea who he really was. He took a special interest in the plans for the pediatric oncology department renovation. Working with child life specialists and oncologists, he helped design a space that would feel less clinical and more comforting, with private family areas, an improved playroom and teen lounge with gaming systems and art supplies. Construction was scheduled to begin soon, but had been delayed due to permit issues with the city. Throughout these first 3 months, Keanu insisted on experiencing the hospital as patients and their families would. He sat in waiting rooms, observed treatments, with patients' permission, and ate in the cafeteria. He wanted to understand every aspect of the hospital before making major changes. What struck him most was the dedication of most staff members. Despite years of working with inadequate resources, many showed extraordinary compassion and commitment. However, he also noticed the toll the previous financial struggles had taken. Some staff members, like Dr. Stevens in the free clinic, showed signs of burnout and frustration. The day before his encounter with Dr. Stevens, Keanu had met with Patel to discuss accelerating the pediatric wing renovations. The permit issues had finally been resolved, but there were new questions about the construction timeline. "I'd like to get a better sense of the current state of the department before we finalize anything," he told her. "I'll stop by tomorrow, just as a regular visitor." "Are you sure you don't want me to accompany you?" Patel asked. "Or at least let the department know you're coming?" Keanu shook his head. "I want to see it as it is, not prepared for inspection. Don't worry. I'll be discreet." He had no way of knowing that his visit would lead to an uncomfortable encounter with an overworked doctor, or that this interaction would set in motion events that would transform the hospital in ways beyond the renovations he had planned. As he left Patel's office, he was simply a man honoring his sister's memory, hoping to create a better environment for children, fighting the same battle she had faced. The next day, dressed in his casual clothes and baseball cap, Keanu Reeves walked into Metro General Hospital not as a celebrity or owner, but as an observer, about to experience firsthand both the dedication and the difficulties of the institution he had saved. Dr. Stevens arrived at work the next morning feeling slightly more refreshed. He'd managed a full 8 hours of sleep and had stopped for a decent cup of coffee on his way to the hospital. His mood improved further when he saw the schedule, a lighter patient load than yesterday and 2 new nurses assigned to the free clinic. Perhaps things were looking up after all. Around 10 a.m., his phone buzzed with a text from Linda Patel, the hospital CEO. "Emergency board meeting, 2 p.m. today, mandatory for all department heads." Dr. Stevens frowned. As head of the free clinic, he was required to attend these meetings, but they usually resulted in more work or bad news about funding. He texted back a quick confirmation and continued with his patients, the meeting hovering in the back of his mind like a storm cloud. At 1:55 p.m., he made his way to the administration wing, nodding to other doctors and department heads gathering outside the boardroom. The atmosphere was tense. Unexpected meetings rarely brought good news in the healthcare world. "Any idea what this is about?" he asked Dr. Wilson, who served as chief of medicine. Dr. Wilson shook his head. "Patel's been tight-lipped, but I saw some suits heading into her office earlier. Maybe something about the renovation funding." Before Dr. Stevens could respond, the boardroom doors opened, and they were ushered inside. The long mahogany table was already half filled with board members and administrators. At the head of the table sat Linda Patel, looking unusually nervous. Beside her was an empty chair. "Please be seated quickly," Patel said. "We're waiting for one more person." Dr. Stevens took a seat halfway down the table, pulling out his tablet to take notes. He was scrolling through his emails when the room suddenly fell silent. He looked up, curious about what had caught everyone's attention. Standing in the doorway was the man from yesterday, the one he'd dismissed so rudely at the free clinic. Only now, instead of jeans and a baseball cap, he wore a simple black suit. His beard was neatly trimmed and his long hair was pulled back. Despite the change in appearance, Dr. Stevens recognized him immediately, and a cold wave of dread washed over him. Even more shocking was how the board members were reacting. Several had stood up and all were looking at the visitor with expressions ranging from surprise to awe. Patel hurried over to greet him, guiding him to the empty chair beside hers. "Ladies and gentlemen," she announced, her voice carrying a mix of respect and excitement. "Most of you haven't had the opportunity to meet him in person yet. This is Mr. Keanu Reeves, founder of the Horizon Foundation and the majority owner of Metro General Hospital." The room erupted in murmurs. Several people looked as shocked as Dr. Stevens felt. Clearly, the actor's ownership had been kept secret from most of the staff. Dr. Stevens felt the blood drain from his face as the realization hit him fully. Yesterday, he had rudely dismissed the owner of the hospital, one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood, telling him that some of us have actual work to do. He watched in mortified silence as Keanu shook hands with those nearest him, his manner humble and friendly despite his status. When Keanu's eyes met his across the table, Dr. Stevens expected anger, or at least recognition of yesterday's encounter. Instead, the actor gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod before turning his attention to Patel. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," Patel began. "As you know, 3 months ago, Metro General was saved from bankruptcy by the Horizon Foundation. What most of you didn't know until now is that the foundation was established by Mr. Reeves, who has taken a personal interest in our hospital's future." She gestured to Keanu, who leaned forward slightly. "I've been visiting the hospital regularly," he said, his voice quieter than Dr. Stevens had expected, forcing everyone to listen carefully. "I wanted to understand how it functions day to day, before making any major changes. My foundation acquired this hospital because we believe in its mission to provide quality health care to everyone, regardless of their financial situation." Keanu opened a folder in front of him. "I've been particularly focused on the pediatric oncology department renovation, which is why I've called this meeting. After observing operations throughout the hospital, I believe we need to accelerate our timeline. Construction will begin next week, not next month, as previously planned." He began outlining his vision for the renovation, not just upgraded medical equipment, but a complete reimagining of the space to support both the physical and emotional needs of young cancer patients and their families. As he spoke, digital renderings appeared on the screen behind him, showing bright, welcoming spaces that looked nothing like the current institutional setting. Dr. Stevens listened in stunned silence, barely able to focus on the presentation as yesterday's interaction replayed in his mind. He had been unnecessarily rude to someone who was investing millions to save their hospital. His career could be over with a single word from the man at the head of the table. After Keanu finished outlining the renovation plans, Patel took over to discuss operational changes. Dr. Stevens tried to pay attention, but his anxiety made it difficult to concentrate. When the meeting finally ended an hour later, he gathered his things quickly, hoping to slip out unnoticed. "Dr. Stevens?" He froze at the sound of Patel's voice. "Yes? Mr. Reeves would like a word with you. In my office, please." The other department heads gave him curious glances as he followed Patel and Keanu out of the boardroom and down the hall to the CEO's office. His heart pounded so loudly, he was sure they could hear it. Once inside, Patel excused herself, leaving Dr. Stevens alone with Keanu Reeves. The actor gestured to the chairs by the window. "Please, have a seat," he said. Dr. Stevens sat stiffly on the edge of the chair. "Mr. Reeves, about yesterday. I want to apologize. I had no idea who you were, but that's no excuse for my behavior. I was unprofessional and rude." Keanu sat down across from him, his expression thoughtful. "Actually, that's exactly why I wanted to talk with you." Dr. Stevens braced himself for the worst. "You treated me the way you would treat any ordinary person asking questions during a busy day." Keanu continued. "That's valuable information for me. I don't want special treatment when I visit. I want to see the real hospital, understand the real challenges." Dr. Stevens blinked in surprise. This was not the response he had expected. "You were stressed," Keanu observed. "Overwhelmed. And from what I've learned about your department, with good reason. The free clinic handles the highest patient volume with the lowest staffing levels in the hospital. We manage," Dr. Stevens said automatically, then sighed. "But yes, it's been difficult, especially before the foundation stepped in. We were constantly told to do more with less. It wears you down after a while." Keanu nodded. "I've seen it throughout the hospital. Dedicated professionals pushed to their limits. That's something I want to address, along with the facility improvements." He pulled a notebook from his jacket pocket, the same one he'd been carrying yesterday. "You've been here 8 years, according to your file. That's a long time to work in a high-stress environment like the free clinic. What changes would you make if you could?" Dr. Stevens hesitated, uncertain if this was a test. "You want my opinion?" "I do," Keanu confirmed. "You're on the front lines every day. You see what works and what doesn't in ways I never could. No matter how many times I visit, Something about the actor's sincerity broke through Dr. Stevens' defenses. He began tentatively at first, then with increasing confidence, describing the challenges they faced daily, the outdated scheduling system that created unnecessary waits, the lack of consistent translation services for non-English speaking patients, the need for a dedicated social worker to help connect patients with resources beyond medical care. Keanu listened intently, occasionally making notes. He asked thoughtful questions that showed he was genuinely trying to understand the complexities of running the clinic. "These are all solvable problems," he said when Dr. Stevens finally ran out of words, "and your insights align with what I've observed elsewhere in the hospital. There's a disconnect between administration and the medical staff that's creating unnecessary friction." He closed his notebook and looked directly at Dr. Stevens. "I have a proposition for you. I'm forming a physician advisory committee to guide our improvement efforts, people who understand the day-to-day realities of patient care. I'd like you to be part of it, representing the free clinic." Dr. Stevens was speechless for a moment. "Even after how I treated you yesterday?" A hint of a smile appeared on Keanu's face. "Especially because of that. You weren't putting on a show or trying to impress me. You were just doing your job under difficult circumstances. That's the perspective we need." I'd be honored," Dr. Stevens managed. "Good," Keanu said, standing up. "The committee will meet weekly, starting next Friday. And Dr. Stevens, I've already approved additional staffing for your clinic. You should see new personnel by the end of the month." As they shook hands, Dr. Stevens felt something he hadn't experienced in a long time: hope. Not just for his department, but for the entire hospital. Walking back to the free clinic, he found himself looking at familiar corridors through new eyes, imagining the possibilities for transformation. When he returned to the clinic, the same nurse who had witnessed yesterday's interaction gave him a questioning look. "Everything okay? You were gone a while." Dr. Stevens nodded, a bemused expression on his face. "Better than okay, actually. It turns out our mysterious benefactor is Keanu Reeves." The nurse's eyes widened. "The actor? Wait, was that him yesterday? The man in the baseball cap?" "The very same," Dr. Stevens confirmed, wincing at the memory. "And despite me being completely rude to him, he's just asked me to join a committee to improve the hospital." "That sounds like the stories you hear about him," the nurse said with a smile. "Everyone says he's the nicest guy in Hollywood. Dr. Stevens picked up his next patient's chart, shaking his head in wonder. "They're right. And it looks like we're all going to benefit from that kindness." The morning sun streamed through the blinds of Dr. Stevens's apartment as he prepared for his day with unusual care. It was Friday, the day of the first physician advisory committee meeting, and despite having worked at Metro General for 8 years, he felt like a new employee on his first day. He chose a crisp blue shirt instead of his usual scrubs, knowing he wouldn't be seeing patients until later. During the past week, rumors had spread throughout the hospital about Keanu Reeves' ownership. Some staff members were skeptical, others excited, but everyone was talking about it. Dr. Stevens had become an unexpected source of information, repeatedly recounting his embarrassing encounter and surprising redemption. "Still can't believe. You told Keanu Reeves you had actual work to do," laughed one of the nurses as Dr. Stevens checked in at the free clinic before heading to the meeting. "Trust me, I'm still cringing," he replied good-naturedly. But somehow it worked out. As he made his way to the administration wing, he noticed small changes throughout the hospital: construction barriers around the pediatric oncology department, new equipment being delivered, fresh paint in some of the hallways. The energy of the place felt different too. There was a sense of anticipation among the staff. The meeting was being held in a renovated conference room that Dr. Stevens barely recognized. Gone was the scratched table and uncomfortable chairs, replaced by modern furniture arranged in a circle, rather than the traditional hierarchical layout of most hospital meetings. Several doctors were already there when he arrived, including representatives from surgery, internal medicine, emergency, and pediatrics. They were chatting casually, cups of coffee in hand. Dr. Stevens poured himself a cup from a new coffee station in the corner, noticeably better than the burnt offering usually available in the staff lounge. At exactly 9 a.m., Linda Patel entered, with Keanu beside her. Today he was dressed in dark jeans and a simple black sweater, casual but professional. The doctors who hadn't met him yet looked slightly starstruck, but Keanu's unassuming manner quickly put everyone at ease. "Thank you all for making time for this," he began after Patel's brief introduction. "I believe that lasting change comes from within an organization, not from outside consultants or top-down mandates. Each of you was selected because you understand what works and what doesn't in your departments." He gestured to the tables. "There are no assigned seats here because there's no hierarchy in this room. Everyone's input has equal value. My role is primarily to listen and provide the resources you need to implement your ideas." The next 2 hours flew by as the committee discussed challenges facing the hospital. Dr. Stevens was initially hesitant to speak up, but when the conversation turned to patient wait times, he found himself sharing his frustrations with the outdated scheduling system. "Patients wait for hours, which means they often miss work or need extra childcare," he explained. "Many can't afford that, so they end up missing appointments and returning later with worsened conditions." To his surprise, other doctors immediately supported his concern, sharing similar experiences from their departments. Even more surprising was Keanu's response. "What if we created evening and weekend hours for certain services?" he suggested. "And provided childcare on site during appointments?" The room went quiet as the doctors exchanged glances. These weren't the cost-cutting measures they were used to hearing from administration. "That would be revolutionary, Dr. Wilson said finally. "But the staffing costs, let me worry about the budget," Keanu said simply. "I want to focus on what would actually solve the problem, not what we think we can afford." By the end of the meeting, Dr. Stevens felt energized, in a way he hadn't experienced in years. The committee had identified 3 immediate priorities: improving the scheduling system, creating a comprehensive translation service, and establishing a patient advocate program. As everyone was gathering their things to leave, Keanu asked Dr. Stevens to stay behind. Once they were alone, he pulled out his ever-present notebook. "I've been thinking about our conversation," Keanu said, "about the disconnect between administration and medical staff. Would you be willing to show me around the free clinic, not as a VIP tour but as a colleague trying to understand the workflow?" "Of course," Dr. Stevens replied, surprised by the request. "When would you like to do this?" "How about now, unless you have patients waiting?" 20 minutes later, Dr. Stevens was leading Keanu through the organized chaos of the free clinic. He had changed into his scrubs and Keanu had donned a simple white coat without a name tag, allowing him to blend in as they moved through the busy department. Dr. Stevens found himself pointing out both problems and improvised solutions. The supply cabinet reorganized by nurses to save time. The unofficial waiting list system they developed when the official one broke down. The donated toys they kept for children stuck waiting with parents. Keanu observed everything with quiet intensity, occasionally asking questions that revealed his deep understanding of systems and efficiency. When they paused in the small staff break room, he surprised Dr. Stevens with an unexpected question. "Why do you stay? With your experience, you could work anywhere: private practice, research, a better-funded hospital. Why Metro General?" Dr. Stevens considered the question carefully. "I grew up in this neighborhood. My mother cleaned office buildings at night so she could take me to doctor's appointments during the day. There was one doctor here, Dr. Patel, no relation to our CEO, who treated her with such respect and kindness. He never rushed her or made her feel small for asking questions." He looked out at the busy clinic floor. "When I finished medical school, I wanted to be that doctor for someone else. And despite all the frustrations, there are moments when I know I've made that difference. That's why I stay." Keanu nodded, seeming to understand perfectly. "That's why this hospital is worth saving. Not just the building or the services, but that spirit." As they continued the tour, Dr. Stevens introduced Keanu to staff members, not as the owner or a celebrity, but simply as a consultant helping with improvements. The staff were professional but straightforward, sharing their challenges without sugarcoating the issues. In the pharmacy area, they encountered a young mother trying to understand her child's medication instructions, clearly struggling with the English on the label. The pharmacy technician was trying his best to explain, but the communication gap was evident. Keanu observed for a moment, then approached them. To Dr. Stevens' surprise, he began speaking to the woman in fluent Spanish. Her face lit up with relief as she asked questions and received clear answers. When she left with a grateful smile, Keanu turned to find Dr. Stevens staring at him. "You speak Spanish?" Dr. Stevens asked. "And a bit of Mandarin," Keanu replied with a small shrug. "It comes in handy sometimes. But this interaction highlights something important. Your staff is doing the best they can with limited resources. Imagine how much more effective they could be with proper support." After completing the tour, they stopped by Dr. Stevens' small office. The space was cluttered but organized, with patient files stacked neatly and family photos on the desk. "Have a proposition?" Keanu said, leaning against the doorframe. "In addition to the committee work, I'd like you to head a new initiative focused specifically on patient experience." Dr. Stevens looked up in surprise. "Patient experience? That sounds like an administration job." "Exactly the problem," Keanu replied. "It's been treated as an administrative concern rather than a medical one. Who better to redesign the patient journey than someone who understands both medical needs and human compassion?" "I don't know if I'm qualified. You're more qualified than a consultant who's never treated a patient," Keanu interrupted gently. "And you'll have a budget and team to support you. This isn't about adding to your workload. It's about giving you the authority to fix problems you've been navigating around for years." Dr. Stevens fell silent, considering the offer. It was an opportunity to address systemic issues he'd complained about for years, to create lasting change rather than temporary workarounds. "Would I still see patients?" he asked finally. "Absolutely," Keanu confirmed. "We want your insights to remain grounded in daily reality. Perhaps a reduced schedule, but maintaining that connection is essential." "Then yes," Dr. Stevens said, surprising himself with his lack of hesitation. "I'd be honored to take this on." Keanu smiled, extending his hand. "Excellent. I'll have Linda draw up the details. And Dr. Stevens, thank you for being rude to me last week. It was exactly what the hospital needed." Dr. Stevens laughed as they shook hands. "I'm never living that down, am I?" "Probably not," Keanu agreed with a grin. "But it makes a good story. How being honest about a bad day led to something positive. That's what we're trying to build here. A place where people can be authentic and still move forward together." As Keanu left, Dr. Stevens sat at his desk, contemplating how completely his professional life had changed in just 1 week. From burnout and frustration to renewed purpose and possibility, all because he'd had the misfortune and eventual fortune of being honest with the right person on the wrong day. His phone buzzed with a message from Linda Patel. "Heard about your new role. Congratulations. Meeting Monday to discuss details. P.S. The look on your face in the board meeting when you recognized Keanu was priceless. Wish I'd taken a picture." Dr. Stevens laughed and tucked his phone away. He had patients waiting, and, for the first time in years, he was genuinely excited about not just helping them today, but creating a system that would serve them better tomorrow. 6 months passed in what felt like the blink of an eye. Dr. Stevens stood at the entrance of the newly renovated pediatric oncology department, taking in the transformation with a sense of wonder. Gone were the drab walls and outdated equipment. In their place stood a space that felt more like a colorful, welcoming village than a hospital ward. The main treatment area featured individual pods designed to give patients privacy while still allowing for social interaction. Each pod had a theme chosen by the children. Space exploration, underwater adventure, enchanted forest, and superhero headquarters were among the favorites. The walls were painted with murals that continued the themes, created by local artists who had volunteered their time. A teenager receiving chemotherapy was playing a video game on a large screen in his pod, while his mother sat comfortably beside him, working on her laptop. In another pod, a child was having a virtual reality experience that transported her to a butterfly sanctuary during a procedure that would have once been frightening and painful. Hard to believe this is the same place, isn't it? Said a voice beside him. Dr. Stevens turned to find Keanu standing there, dressed casually in jeans and a simple black t-shirt. Despite his growing involvement in the hospital's transformation, the actor still maintained his low-key presence, often appearing unexpectedly in different departments. It's incredible, Dr. Stevens agreed. The medical equipment is top of the line, but it's the thought put into the patient experience that really stands out. Did you see the new playroom? They walked together toward a large, bright space filled with carefully designed play areas for different age groups. Through the glass walls, they could see children playing, some attached to IV poles, others there to support siblings receiving treatment. A child life specialist was leading an art project at one table, while a therapy dog visited with children in a cozy reading corner. The architects did an amazing job, Keanu said, but it was your patient experience team that really shaped this space. Your insights about the emotional journey of families dealing with childhood cancer transformed the blueprints. Dr. Stevens felt a surge of pride. In the months since his appointment to lead the Patient Experience Initiative, he'd thrown himself into the work with renewed energy. His team had interviewed hundreds of patients and families, shadowed medical staff through typical workdays, and reimagined every touchpoint in the patient journey. "How's the free clinic renovation coming along?" Keanu asked as they continued their tour. "On schedule for completion next month," Dr. Stevens replied with excitement. "The new layout will double our efficiency without feeling rushed or impersonal, and the technology upgrades mean patients can check in online before arriving, reducing wait times significantly." They stopped by a window overlooking the hospital's new healing garden, a peaceful space with walking paths, benches, and a small fountain. Medical staff on breaks mingled with patients and families seeking fresh air and a moment of tranquility. "There's something I wanted to discuss with you," Keanu said, his tone becoming more serious. "A local news reporter has been asking questions about the hospital's turnaround. They're particularly interested in the mysterious owner behind the changes." Dr. Stevens nodded. The hospital's transformation hadn't gone unnoticed in the community. Patient satisfaction scores had skyrocketed, and word had spread about the improved facilities and care. "Linda has managed to deflect most of the questions," Keanu continued, "but they're getting more persistent. They're planning a feature on the hospital's revival." "And you'd prefer to remain anonymous," Dr. Stevens guessed. Keanu smiled slightly. "I didn't do this for publicity. The moment my name is attached to the story, it becomes about me rather than about what's been accomplished here, about what you and every staff member have accomplished." He paused, looking out at the garden. "I've suggested they speak with the medical staff instead, the people who make this place work every day. Would you be willing to be interviewed? As the lead on patient experience, you have unique insight into the changes." Dr. Stevens considered the request. 6 months ago, he might have hesitated, uncomfortable with the spotlight. But his confidence had grown alongside his renewed passion for his work. "I'd be happy to," he agreed, "but I won't lie if they ask directly about your involvement." "I wouldn't expect you to," Keanu assured him. "Just share your experience honestly. That's all I've ever asked of anyone here." The following week, Dr. Stevens met with a reporter from the local newspaper in the hospital's new cafe, another improvement that provided healthy food options for staff and visitors alike. The reporter, Mei Chen, was in her early 30s, with a sharp eye and a notepad full of questions. "So, Dr. Stevens," she began after they'd settled with their coffee, "you've been at Metro General for almost 9 years now. Tell me about the changes you've witnessed, especially in recent months." Dr. Stevens took a sip of his coffee, gathering his thoughts. 6 months ago, this hospital was on life support, understaffed, underfunded, with facilities that hadn't been updated in decades. Now we're not just surviving. We're thriving in ways none of us thought possible. "What sparked this transformation?" Chen asked, her pen poised above her notepad. Dr. Stevens smiled, remembering his first encounter with Keanu. "New ownership with a vision beyond profit margins. The Horizon Foundation acquired the hospital with the commitment to preserve our mission of serving everyone in this community, regardless of their ability to pay. And this foundation, There are rumors about who's behind it, Chen probed. Some say it's a celebrity with a personal connection to the hospital. I can tell you that the foundation's founder has a deeply personal connection to pediatric cancer treatment, Dr. Stevens replied carefully. Their sister battled leukemia years ago, and that experience shaped their commitment to improving hospital environments for children and families facing similar challenges. Chen nodded, making notes. The pediatric oncology department renovation has received particular attention. I toured it yesterday. It's unlike any hospital space I've seen. That's intentional, Dr. Stevens explained, warming to the topic. We wanted to create an environment that supports healing beyond just medical treatment. Children with cancer spend so much time in hospitals. Their surroundings should bring comfort, not additional stress. The interview continued for over an hour, with Chen asking detailed questions about specific improvements and the philosophy behind them. Dr. Stevens found himself speaking passionately about the Patient Experience Initiative, the staff empowerment programs, and the community outreach efforts that had been implemented. You seem personally invested in these changes, Chen observed toward the end of their conversation. Has your own experience at the hospital changed as well? Dr. Stevens considered the question, reflecting on his journey from burnout to renewed purpose. Profoundly, he admitted. 6 months ago, I was exhausted and frustrated, doing my best for patients but constantly fighting against broken systems. I was becoming the kind of doctor I never wanted to be, rushed, sometimes short with people, focused on problems rather than possibilities. He glanced around at the busy cafe, noting the relaxed posture of his colleagues, the smiles on patients' faces. Now I wake up excited about coming to work again. I'm not just treating illnesses, I'm helping build something meaningful and lasting. Chen made a final note, then closed her notebook. One last question, Dr. Stevens. There's a story circulating among hospital staff about you and the mysterious owner. Something about an awkward first meeting. Care to comment? Dr. Stevens laughed, shaking his head. Let's just say our first interaction wasn't my finest moment. I was having a terrible day and was rather dismissive of someone asking questions, someone who turned out to be quite important to the hospital's future. And yet here you are leading a major initiative, Chen pointed out. That speaks to the character of our benefactor, Dr. Stevens replied sincerely. They care more about substance than appearances, more about creating positive change than receiving recognition. That philosophy has transformed not just our facilities but our culture. The article appeared the following Sunday, featured prominently on the front page of the local paper. The headline read, Metro General's Remarkable Revival. How One Hospital Redefined Patient Care. The story focused on the improvements, the staff's renewed commitment, and the philosophy behind the changes. While it mentioned the Horizon Foundation and its anonymous founder, the article didn't speculate about Keanu's involvement. Instead, it highlighted the stories of patients who had experienced the transformed hospital and the medical staff who made it possible. Dr. Stevens was quoted extensively, including his final statement. Our anonymous owner taught me the most important lesson in medicine. Everyone, regardless of appearance or status, deserves respect and kindness. Sometimes the person you dismiss today might be the one who gives you a chance tomorrow. The day after the article was published, Dr. Stevens arrived at work to find a small package on his desk. Inside was a high-quality stethoscope with his name engraved on it. The accompanying note, handwritten on simple stationery, read, For hearing not just heartbeats, but the hopes and concerns behind them. Thank you for helping build a hospital that truly heals. Dr. Stevens smiled as he placed the stethoscope around his neck. Outside his office, the free clinic was already filling with patients. The new check-in system was working smoothly, the waiting area was comfortable and welcoming, and his medical team moved through their tasks with confidence and purpose. He prepared to see his first patient of the day. Dr. Stevens reflected on how completely his professional life had changed in just 6 months. All because he'd been honest, even if rudely so, with a man in a baseball cap who turned out to be much more than he appeared. Dr. Stevens? His nurse's voice pulled him from his thoughts. Your first patient is ready. Thank you, he said, standing up with renewed energy. Let's make today count.